Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Early Childhood Leadership Conference. I'm Connie Wolshansky, your host, and I'm really excited to have my guest here with us today. Tony, I actually don't know how to pronounce your name. Please, can you pronounce it?
Well, think of August, D'Agostino.
Awesome. I love that. So Tony is the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360 with 10 years of owning four early learning centers in New York. And what's really interesting about Tony, he actually comes with 30 plus years of experience in entrepreneur and corporate with people like Ernst & Young, Pearson Education, and Xerox, as well as HR services, talent management, and employee engagement. So Tony has this really robust just experience that he has. And I'm really excited to be talking about how reputation is everything and what is your brand identity. So welcome, Tony, and I'm excited to dig into what we have to talk about today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Connie.
Yep. So when we think about a powerful brand, I typically think about places like Google or Apple or Amazon, because when I think about, they take up visual space in my mind. I needed to order a laptop case for my iPad. The first place I went to was Amazon. I didn't even have to think. Like, I knew I was going there, right? It's kind of like my default response. And what I want, listeners to understand is that it's not an accident that becomes our default response. It's super intentional, the way the companies design their brand so that certain things become our default response. It's that powerful presence in the marketplace. So when we think about a powerful brand, what are some of the components that you think about, Tony?
Well, it's a really good question. And, we're in the world of early learning, childcare, private schools. We just don't have the Google or the Apple budgets or Coca-Cola.
Yeah, that's also true. I like that you're bringing that up.
So we have to be, conscious of what we can really do. So there's a lot of different elements of brand, from what a brand identity is, to what your colors are, to what your logo is, to what the actual personality of the brand is, the positioning of your brand, how to make people aware of what your brand is, and then that overall experience, defining what are your differentiators in the brand, as well as, the gaps between what you're actually promising and what you're actually delivering. And at the very end of it too, what to do in a crisis with your brand. So as you ask about it, there's a lot of areas to go into, but let's sort of look at some of the low-hanging fruit, which might be helpful for owners and directors out there. Is, how should we really start thinking about what our brand is and what it means? So it's sort of like what you just said, Shani, in the sense that what you think about when you hear the name. So when you hear the name and you think about something, it creates almost an automated response. It's easy to do that with huge budgets. But when there's folks who are looking for care or who are using your care today, but also what's even more important to a certain degree are the ones who are working for you. A lot of it deals with what your identity is to them. You could consider an identity being your colors and your logo, but realistically, what your identity is the meaning. What does it mean to your staff members? What does it mean to your families? What does your brand mean to your community? So I think the first thing to do is to identify with what does your brand mean to everybody who's circling you and surrounding your business. I would say that when you think about positioning or the personality, you then have to think about differentiators. There's several different consultants out there, as well as myself and others, who will really have you think about boiling down what makes us different. If there's another,
would you say that's like the first thing that you would go into, like what makes us different when you're thinking about like a brand identity?
I think it's important to understand what makes you different. It's not the first thing, but there's a few things in parallel.
Okay.
So when you think about differentiation, it's what makes things different. But here's the question.
Yeah.
What makes things different for you as the owner might be one thing. What makes it different for the director, to the parents, to the staff? So how do you get to true differentiation?
Okay.
And that sort of blends in of how do you start identifying what is your current brand? So in doing that, what you're doing is you're sort of getting out there and you're listening. You're doing this through talking to your parents, to your staff, and starting to understand, what do they believe when they think about you? What do they think about?
So would that be one of the questions you would ask? Like, what are you thinking about when you think about our school?
Yeah, for instance,
Okay.
when you look at a brand, the brand oftentimes is based on something. And
Okay.
in our world, the way I like to look at brand is based on values. It should be. Now, just because your values happen to be a list of certain things, again, doesn't mean that's what people think of. But when you say, if you were to ask your families and say, so when you think of us, what are the values do you think that we have?
I
Okay.
love that question.
And so when they come, they go, well, you know what, you guys are great. You're great because you really care. Okay, great. What else is there? Well, you're sort of like an extension of our family. Well, that's awesome. Well, you're pricey. Oh,
Hmm.
okay. Well, what else? Well, you're really not flexible.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, what else? Well, you got the nicest teachers. That's wonderful. Turnover's huge for you. Oh, so you notice how there's some ups and downs, but what you're doing is you may have values, but their values could very well be different.
They
Same,
typically are.
yeah, exactly. But same with, which is also key too, is your staff.
Yeah.
Do not bypass your staff. Your staff is really key to this, because
Yeah.
you ask your staff what you think the values are. They might be like, oh, well, as an owner, you like to make money. Oh, that's how you think of it?
Wow.
Okay. Or as an owner is, yeah, you really are not overly flexible.
Huh.
Or you know what? You're just absolutely amazing. Everything we ask for, you give us. And that's wonderful. But there's elements of, so before you actually look at, when we talked about identifying a brand,
Yep.
to dig deeper there, it's really identifying first and foremost, what are your values?
Yeah,
And
I love this thing here about values, and I don't want to like spend too much time on it because it's such a huge topic in itself. But even just every director identifying what her own personal core values are that she or he lives their own life by. Like my top two core values are my faith and connection, and I filter every single decision through those two values. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm going to filter like everything. Those are my two biggest pieces. And so I love this piece of identifying the values of the school, and even taking it a step further, a step backwards, and saying, do you as an owner or director have personal values that you live your life by?
that's right. And that's why when you look at what your center values are, whether you're a director, an owner,
Yeah.
or a leader,
Yeah.
your values are only one component.
Yeah.
Your family values, the families that are with you, as well as your staff. If you can combine the three of those, boil those down, you've really then determined what your values are that you're bringing forth to your community. That's where you start to identify what your brand is, because your brand then means, what do you mean to that audience? And so you do this through surveys, you
Mm-hmm.
do this through listening. You're able to process this information by something that is really important too, that it's tough for us to do, but it's like exit interviews. And what I mean by exit interviews is that you have staff members who occasionally leave, you have families that leave. Oftentimes, I know with my 4 centers, I will have a director who will have talked to a family and they said, we have to give our notice. We're going to be leaving in 2 weeks. And like, oh, we don't want to lose you. Why? Where are you going? Oh, yeah, we have to move out of town, or we're moving across town, or you know what? We're just going to have grandma care for, Sarah and what have you. And then, 3 months later, you have a staff member who just joined you and goes, oh, no, that family's over at another childcare right now. You're like, well, wait a minute, but they told me this. Well, the reason they told you that is because they don't want to get in conflict with you, oftentimes. So getting authentic exit interviews is sometimes a challenge. But when you hear why people have left you, whether it be a staff member or whether it be a family, can end up to being one of two things. It can be negative, or really a root cause, as they say, as to why they left, or it could be highly positive, which could end up being a testimonial for you. But in either case, the reason why it affects your brand is because you perceive what you're offering is this. However, they're saying that it's this. And one of the elements that we talked about is the brand gap. So brand gap is really saying, what is the brand that you're portraying, but what's the brand that's actually being received?
Love
and
that.
Critical to understand with your center is, and it's tough because honestly, Kenny, it's you're having to take a hard look at yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
your business, but this is where things get real.
Yeah.
When you take a real hard look at yourself and the business that you're managing, you have an amazing opportunity that I know sometimes it hurts your ego, but you can start going, okay, this is who we want to be, but we're here. And then you identify what's in between, and that's called a gap. And with that, it allows you then to help create a roadmap or how to really look at it and going, how do we solve that?
Yeah. So let's pause for a second before we move on, because I want to kind of bring what you said together and then we'll move on. So we spoke about the brand identity is so many pieces. Number one, it's understanding your personal values and the values of the school. So asking questions to parents, either through in-person conversations, through surveys, through just, one-on-one interactions in the school, and then the teachers finding out what do they think the values of the school are? What do they perceive as the owner or director's, direct values? And then you went into a little bit about, conducting exit interviews as another way of getting some data points for your brand. Yeah. The last piece that you just said, which I really like, is understanding the brand gap, where you want your brand to be and where it currently is right now. And so what I would say is, when we're thinking about the brand gap, right? Let's say I'm an owner and I'm watching this. I'm like, okay, whoa, Tony nailed it on the head. I need to find out what those, questions are, whatever it is. I'm going to go do that tomorrow. When I have that data, right, after a week or two of collecting, what do I do with that information? How is that information going to help me with this brand gap now?
Okay. So you've gone out, you've done some surveying, you've done some talking, you've done some identification, you may have gotten some exit interview data. You may have done a roundtable with your parents. You may have done a staff meeting and you gathered a bunch of information. Now, where is an opportunity is for you to start to create a bit of a roadmap. And what I mean by that is you start to boil down commonalities in the information that is coming from different sources. So between what you've had in your listening or your surveys, between what you've had from exit interviews, you start to go, okay, there's general themes here. For instance, our bathrooms are dirty. Okay, it sounds like, well, why would we ever hear about that? Well, the thing is you start hearing people going, well, it doesn't smell great in your bathrooms. Mm. That starts, if you hear it in several different areas, you start going, well, they might be having a perception that cleanliness is not a priority for us.
Wow.
And cleanliness, if it's not a priority for us, do people start thinking from the staff to the families that cleanliness is really an issue? And then as you boil down the different sections, you can start to look at where did we hear them the most? How often did we hear them? And then you can start ranking them. You can rank them, number one, by what you perceive to be the most important, but you can also rank them by what I call the low-hanging fruit. And that is just like, what can we solve today?
Yep.
What are things that are going to take a couple weeks to solve? And then what are those really big rocks that I'm going to need more than myself to come in here and probably get some team or some coaching or something to support me to solve those big problems? Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's super helpful. So I love what you said about like kind of numbering, like what are some things that I can do by myself? Like those are quick fixes. I know that I could, hire a cleaning crew just to clean the building better or whatever it is. And then what are the things that we can work together internally? And then where is it like, this is a problem, but I'm not really sure how to solve it. That's where I bring in outside help as well. So I love your numbering system. I think that's a super practical way to take the data, and go ahead with it. So I'm going to take a little bit of a hard left here when we think about brand and enrollment and marketing, right? Mm-hmm. One of the biggest pain points for owners and directors is like low enrollment or their spots are in full or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. How does your brand affect your marketing and enrollment?
So that's a really good question. Brand is almost everything, but
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah, it's true.
the word that we use with brand, again, you're thinking Apple, you're thinking American Express, you think Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Again, think of brand just simply as what you mean to that person. What are the stories that are in a person's head when you talk to them and they hear your company, they understand your business? What is your reputation? And that's really what it comes down to, is really managing your reputation and recognizing that you do have ownership of your reputation if you choose to manage it. If you don't, like everything else, if you do not manage your own reputation, everybody else out there is going to manage it for you. And then
Oh
you,
my God, truth bomb right there. Let's repeat that because we got to rewind because that's huge. Can
yeah,
you just say that part again about
no problem.
yeah.
Yeah, if you are not managing your reputation, everybody else is out there creating and defining what your reputation is.
So
If
good.
you do not have that control, then it is very difficult for you to make that connectivity of driving up enrollments to managing turnover, both for, and let's look at these as very parallel paths. You'll hear me um, interweaving both enrollment, but also retaining great staff.
Sure.
It's the same,
Yeah.
keeping great staff, keeping enrollments, attracting new staff members, increasing your enrollments. It's a very similar path. And a lot of it comes down to what your reputation is.
Yeah.
How many people want to have their child come to a center with a poor reputation? How many staff members want to come and work for a place that does not have a great reputation?
Yeah.
So getting in front of your reputation, understanding what the elements are, and being proactive about it means that you are immediately giving yourself a leg up on the kind of people you can recruit, the kind of staff you can retain. It gives you a huge leg up on the fact that when people identify who you are and what you are as a business, that's why they want to come to you and have their child enrolled with you, and that's why they stay with you.
So I need to rewind for a second because this is super good stuff. So number one, you said the brand is the story that other people are saying about you. And I think that if you're going to walk away with a soundbite or a nugget of what we're talking about today, it's the brand. Yes, you have control over it. And it's the control over what is the story that the parents are saying in the playground, that the dads are talking about at work, that the teachers are talking about at their coffee shop or on the weekend, when they go to their parties. Like, what are they all saying about you? That's the brand, that story that everyone's saying. And the other piece about you have control over your reputation. And if you're not going to be in charge of what goes out there, that's it. You're leaving that up to fate, and hope is not a strategy, So let's dig into, you spoke about some of the ways of getting like an audit, like, getting the, asking people the questions, doing the surveys, and then identifying, where, like, what immediate changes you can make, where you have to call and help.
Mm-hmm.
When you're, in your experience of working with childcare centers who come to you and say, we have a brand gap, this is, where we think we're struggling. What are some concrete action steps, not with like logo or, colors or whatever it is, that the director could do? Because like what you're saying is that the reputation is everything, which it is how can someone start working on their own personal reputation and how the story of what everyone else is saying is really getting out there?
Yeah, so it's a good
question. So.
No, it's really good questions, and it sort of merges into what we were saying before.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, a lot of it is, it comes down to two things.
Okay.
Well, I'll push them together, and I call it authentic listening. And the reason I call it authentic listening is because oftentimes we listen, we're interpreting in our minds what people are saying. When we're talking to a staff member and a staff member is saying, you know what, I've asked for this, or I need a bathroom break and I haven't had a bathroom break in so long, and blah, 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 and like, yes. And in your mind, you're saying, Janie just always is complaining, but you're not really listening to exactly what Janie's saying. The same with a parent who's sort of hemming and hawing a little bit, going, well, you guys have a lot of carbs on your menu, what have you. We sometimes interpret what is being said, and we write down that we need to change the menu, or we need to, I need to get into, Janie's not happy today. Yep. But at the end of the day, those might not be what we call the root cause.
Right.
The root cause is where you want to boil it down. And so where I think you start with authentic listening is when someone asks you a question, it's not that you perceive what the answer is. You just explore that question with some more questions. You start to say, when they start saying, hey, I'm having an issue here, you start to get into it and say, tell me a little bit more about that. What is it that has been bugging you about that? Or what is it that's working so well? Why is it that you're so happy every time when you come in? I just love the way that your teachers do a handoff in the morning. I just love that. Really, tell me a little bit more about that. Now, usually you just take a compliment and you walk on, right?
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much. Woohoo, we got a compliment,
Exactly.
But really ask deeper questions.
Yeah. Exactly. You start asking little deeper questions, but you're really listening. So it's easy to listen to when it's a compliment, but when it's something that's tough, you want to avoid it. You don't want to take the criticism, but that authentic listening of writing down what the person's actually saying, not what you perceive that they're saying, you start capturing that kind of data. And so if you really want to start today, it really starts with that authentic listening as to what people are saying to you and why they're saying it to you. So I would highly recommend that when someone brings up a challenge to you, someone, questions your direction, someone says we're having an issue here, is ask them a question, explore, understand, break down where they're coming from so you can understand it. And by the way, personally, they'll greatly appreciate it, and it starts becoming the foundation of that brand because they know that you're listening. The worst part is talking to someone and they're ready to respond. They have an answer for you, and you haven't even saying your statement yet.
Yeah, I think I'm stuttering here. So I think when someone's listening to this also is recognizing that listening is a skill that really is a practice. I know that I struggled with listening for a long time, many, many years ago. And I've become so much better at really listening to my kids and being quiet, not interrupting, listening when other people are talking, and just waiting to hear what else the person has to say. What else, like you were saying before. But I think the most important thing from what you're saying is that it's a practice. Understand that you're not going to get it right out of the gate. And, you'll try this exercise tomorrow, and then the next day you'll be like, God, I can't believe I interrupted again, or whatever it is. It's fine. In 5 minutes, someone else will give you a chance again to listen. Don't worry. So I think, understand it's a practice. It's going to take time, and not beat yourself up every time you interrupt or you don't do active listening. Know that it's a practice that you want to get better at. So.
And exactly what you're saying. It's a practice. It's tough. One of the things that I've done, it's funny, at some point in time with all of my directors at my centers, I've written this for them. And I've posted it right next to
I can't see.
So I don't know. It just says, ask a question, and it's posted on their wall where they just have it by their phone or whatever. And the reason is oftentimes, and we're getting, you're going, well, why are we talking about asking questions, what have you? I thought we were talking about brand here. But what we're really talking about is defining what people are really saying about you.
Yes.
And what is important. So when someone is, coming to you and saying we have an issue, it's asking questions and not trying to absorb and interpret as much as get to that root cause.
The root cause is also, again, a skill, knowing how to drill down, that takes time to understand the root cause analysis. It's not, and I think also anyone that's watching as well is, we all have our superpowers. We all have skills that we're amazing at. Either you were a superstar teacher, now you're a director, or you were a director, you brought in, you became owner. No one's amazing at everything, but there are some core skills that are important to have when you're in this leadership position, and it can be learned if you want to. So
and exactly, when we talk about listening is just being active. it's not hearing. Hearing is just whatever noise is being made. You're taking it in. Listening is asking questions. It's providing gestures back. It's nodding your head. It's writing things down. For instance, whenever I come into a meeting, the way I force myself to listen, I hark back to school or college, is I'm taking notes like crazy. I'm always taking notes because it forces me to listen to what's being said. So when someone starts talking to me, I always say up front, I go, do you mind me do you mind me taking notes? And they're like, oh, no problem at all. It's sort of like the waiter at the restaurant. Here's a good example. Here's a nice tie-in.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so you go to a restaurant, you go to a nice high-end restaurant, and you're there with 10 people that night. And then you have the waiter who comes around and he has his hands behind his back and he's talking. You give the order and he's not writing any of it down. What's going on in your mind is, are you impressed by this restaurant? Are you impressed by this waiter? Or are you betting on what he's going to get wrong?
Oh, so I have to tell you this story because this just happened and it's like exactly this. And it was, so basically my brother has this friend and they went out with 10 people in this restaurant, very high-end restaurant. They were 10 people. I mean, the tip was going to be close to, $200-300, just the tip, based on the percentage of what they were going to be ordering, right? Absolutely. So the waiter comes, his hands are behind his back, all cocky, and everyone, says their order. And the guy who was paying for the whole bill was like, aren't you going to write it down? He's like, no, everything's here. All right. He comes, the servers come to start giving out food. They got all the food right, but he didn't write down who ordered what. So he starts saying, who ordered the steak? Who ordered the fish, right? So the guy who's paying for the bill is like, everyone, put your heads down. This guy is going to figure it out. And if not, we're not leaving a tip. Like, he didn't write anything down. He needs to figure out who did what. They all sat there with their heads down for 20 minutes until he remembered who ordered what. He's like, in a high-end restaurant, you remember who ordered the steak. You don't say who ordered what. This isn't a lunchroom.
So, Connie, let me ask you this.
Off half his tip, but I thought it was such a good example.
So let me ask you this, Connie.
Yeah.
Now that you were there, what do you think?
Oh, I wasn't part of it. I just witnessed it.
Okay.
I wasn't at that table.
Okay. But still then, what does that make you think of the brand of that environment? What is it that they're doing right? What is it that they're not doing right?
Yeah.
That's what happens. You start thinking about, this is how this place is. So the next time you tell a story on a national podcast or
I'm telling this story, right? I'm not going to tell you the name of the restaurant, but I'm telling this story about the restaurant that the waiters were really cocky and just not respectful. They weren't listening. We've never gone back there since. It's been almost 3 years.
So you get into it. And remember, we talked about up front is, what is a brand? A brand is the story that's in your head, right? And so when you see it now, you immediately see that waiter with his hands behind the back, start asking it. You start telling the story of, this is what my experience is going to be. You start questioning it. You're starting like, he's going to get something wrong, blah, 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 whatever it might be. But that's why it does start with listening. It does start with being authentic. It does allow you to be criticized too. It's being able to take criticism in and not being offended. That, people are, one of the best things you can receive, I hate to say it in this way, but one of the best things you can receive as a leader in business is criticism.
Sure.
And the reason is because if someone is not giving you criticism and then they leave you, then they don't respect you enough to tell you what it is that is bothering them. If they're criticizing you, they're giving you an opportunity to improve. And that's to improve what your brand experience is.
Such a mindset shift. Tony, I love this. I love that you just said that. It's so hard to get feedback. It's so hard to get those notes because it really just, it hurts the ego. It hurts, especially when you're working so hard and you're putting yourself out there and taking risks. It's not easy to get feedback. But I love this mindset shift of the person who's giving feedback, obviously if it's done respectfully, but cares. Like, they're giving you the feedback because they care. And, obviously we also have to be cautious about whose feedback we're listening to because there's haters out there and haters will hate no matter what. So, just bringing that. But going back to your restaurant example, I just want to share one other piece when it comes to brand. Absolutely. We have this other restaurant that we love to go to. And every time I like my stuff really hot, my coffee, my soup, like anything that has to be hot has to be hot. So this one waiter, whenever we come there, he knows us already and he knows I like my stuff hot. So when this other server brought out my cappuccino for the end of the thing, the waiter comes and then all of a sudden I see this guy coming after me. He goes, no. Connie likes her drinks hot. Let me take it back. He took it back. He reheated it for me. He brought it back. Now, To me, that's like, we've come back to that restaurant again and again and again. And think about it, so small. It's making the cappuccino extra hot because that's the way I like it. But that's the story I tell about this restaurant. Like, they care, they know my name. Like, that's how much, like, and we don't go there that often that he would, like, he cares. So,
Yep.
such a great.
What you've developed is they developed a reputation
Yeah.
of how their customer is important to them.
Yes.
That reputation is based on the story in your head. And so when you talk to other people and they say, hey, listen, and let's say it's a Greek restaurant. Hey, do you know of a great Greek restaurant? Let me tell you exactly who you have to go to. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
You know, you can't get there quickly.
Yeah.
Same thing with your childcare business. It's,
I love that.
You know, if parents are at a toddler birthday, are the parents at the toddler birthday party going, you know, I don't know what's going on in that center. They're having such issues. Or are they going, listen, I'm going to see if I can get you an opportunity to come there and, you know, have an interview to get your child in there. You know,
so good.
You know, so what is that conversation that's happening at a toddler birthday party? If your friends are at a, not restaurant, excuse me, your staff are at a restaurant, what are your staff saying to one another? Are they trying to recruit other friends there, or are they over there just talking about how upset they are? So it's not easy. We're not going to try to, I'm not going to try to push this off, you know, Connie, that this is an easy.
No way. We like hard work here. This is good. Yeah.
But what it does is it starts with fundamentals and consistently, because as you look to build your identity, as you look to build your reputation, as you identify what your gap is as to where you are, as to where you want to be, you start recognizing and start building out that roadmap. And that roadmap is simply a step-by-step approach of what can you do, what's low-hanging as to what is important, and start to knock those things off. But then you want to take it to what I would call, you know, there's really two other elements in here, and I'll be quick about it, but is creating awareness of who your brand is. And you talk about increasing enrollments, which is really important, or holding on to your staff.
Retention,
retention. Awareness is critical, because there's one thing to have it, there's another thing for people to actually know about it. So oftentimes you'll think as well, if we promote ourselves in the community, we have to say, we are looking to enroll someone right away. We are looking to hire someone right away. If you're doing it properly, if you're setting yourself up for the marathon, not the short-term sprint, you're creating awareness with your staff, with your families, with the community as to who you are. So when you do go out there and try to recruit a staff member, so when you are trying to increase your enrollments, people have that story in their head and they're much quicker to respond. So creating awareness is a 24/7 thing, that you're always creating that awareness. Now, there's many things of brand we could talk about, but really sort of the last one I think is really important, is being prepared for a crisis. And in our industry, crisis management is so amazingly critical to the life and death of our business. And the reason I bring it up as such a poignant piece of it is because your business and your reputation is difficult to build over time. It's a lot of energy. You and I just talked about this. You know, we're into it for the hard work. You were saying we're into like rolling up our sleeves and making this happen. That's awesome. You build up this reputation, is great. But in a moment, your reputation can go out by the wayside, can fly out. You have a toddler who got out of the playground and wandering over across the park, you know, whatever it might be, that can be devastating. You get a call from a news reporter who says that we had a staff member from the news crew come in and they were able to pull a child out of your center without being authenticated as to who they are. All of a sudden, you're in a situation where your business may not open up tomorrow if you do not handle it right. So thinking about what to do in the case of a crisis, and again, it's like you would say, Connie, this is a whole other webcast.
It is. Everything you said is a whole nother interview.
Yeah. So, but the fact is, you have to keep an eye on when things don't go right.
Yeah.
How are you handling the situation? Because at that point in time, you can only ask so many questions. You can only get to so much cost. It's where the rubber meets the road, and you all of a sudden have to be prepared as to How does your staff think about it? How have you as the director thinks about it, or as the owner? And conversely, if you're going to say one thing as the director, will the owner say something different? Are you as the director even supposed to say something about it, or does it default to the owner? Or if you're the owner and you're a owner who's not on site, so do you have a plan? So crisis is critical to maintaining the quality of your reputation.
I think it goes back to the very first thing we said when we just started this interview is the values, right? When I'm in crisis management, my values are going to help me make the decisions, right? What am I filtering these decisions? We have a crisis right now. How are we solving it? So values are huge. If you're using them right, they're supposed to anchor and help you make difficult decisions, stay in hard conversations. So I love that you brought up this point of crisis management, because while it's a separate topic, it is part of brand, because if you have a powerful brand and when your teachers are aligned with it and your parents, then when crisis hits, and I say when because no school is never going to have a crisis, you know how to, rise up after that.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, in leadership positions, when we're in leadership, when we're in management positions, and I was just telling another one of our staff members this earlier today, it's not about being right or being wrong. It's about making the best decision with the information you have.
Yes.
There's a big difference between that, because oftentimes it's all we can do every day is just try our best and go with our gut and try to work our best. But it's those things that build our reputation. It's those things about being authentic. It's those things to staying with your values. It's staying on track. It's evaluating what you have and building upon it. So
I love that. I love that. And, it just helps bring everything here full circle in that, because it's a practice, core values, authentic listening, the questions to ask, all these things are a practice that take time. And a lot of the practice of taking time is also consistently building your own awareness and your own knowledge. So when you think about resources or books to read, or just starting to develop this awareness of brand, you have a lot of experience in this field. What are some books or resources that you would recommend listeners go check out?
So there's a number of different things, and you could read a whole bunch of stuff on brand, but I don't know if it gets you extremely far, extremely quick for the kind of business brand. So we started talking about sort of the foundation. So if you're going to build your business, you're going to build, as they say, build your church, what have you, you start with a very strong foundation. And I believe starting that out with values. Okay. One of the books that really talks a lot about values is a book like Traction. Yeah. Traction out there is a book that really dives into sort of why we do and what we do within an organization. And it really helps you think about the root values that you have. The other element about being authentic in listening, there's a book out there, I think it's Kelly Preston, but it's called Crucial Conversations. And I actually did that book as a book club with my staff a couple years back, where what we did is we had 12 chapters, and we would go through with the directors, and every week in our director meeting, we would talk about one of the chapters, and each person led a different one. But we went through that because it talked about having these very authentic conversations, willingness to receive information, willingness to talk in a way that was being factual and not very subjective to the situation.
I like this. So Crucial Conversations and Traction. And Traction's a great book. It's a fun kind of easy read. It's not like all these do this or do this. It's like this story thing that, portrays the core values. So it's a great book as well. So thank you for sharing those two. When you think about audio, podcasts, TED Talks, stuff like that, I know some people are not readers, but they like listening or video. Anything that you would recommend in that field of media?
It's a good question. There's so many different things for so many different areas. I honestly probably would have to think about that a little bit more.
Oh, that's fine.
No. But the idea is there's a lot of people. I would hone in. I think again, we talked about sort of foundational stuff here first, and so instead of boiling the ocean of we're going to change our entire brand overnight, it really is sort of getting to those root elements. So when you really talk about, if you're searching for TED Talks, if you're looking at podcasts, whether you're talking to several of the different gurus in the industry or what have you, sort of like you, Connie, in here, you start listening to some of their information. You're going to find a lot of gold within there. You're going to find these nuggets that you can take away. So I highly recommend being very active and always trying to spend some time learning. It does take time, but if you're, audio as to video or visual learner, or you like to just simply read, always making it a piece of your week.
Yeah, I love that. And it's for me, it's a practice. Like every day for 15 minutes, I read. It's a huge, it has to happen. It's blocked in my calendar. I don't go to sleep without doing that. So it's understanding, if you're a growing school and you want to create excellence in your school, you need to constantly be learning, and not just regurgitating the same information over and over again, but really learning new things, new strategies. So let's end off with this, Tony. When you think of the word early childhood leadership, the conference is, the EC Leadership Conference. How do you define early childhood leadership?
So I think when you're looking at, that's a good question. When you think about what is early childhood leadership, oftentimes I hear people say, we're in it for the children. And well, yeah, that's table stakes. Of course we are. But that doesn't mean that what you do is you bypass the fact that you're actually running a business.
Yeah.
In fact, at the end of the day, it's similar to, when you're in the airplane and they start giving you the safety drills and they say, when the oxygen mask, put on your oxygen mask first before you put it on the child. Why? Because if you're passed out when you did it to the child, you're not helping anybody. Yep. So you have to sort of pay yourself first and take care of yourself first. It's the same way with your business. Is if you start to build a very strong brand, if you really can engage your staff, if you can really look at the time and the efficiencies that you have within your business, you build up this wonderful element of creating this culture for your business. And when you can do that, you're setting yourself up for the long run as an early learning leader. So if you want to do some amazing things because of the kind of learning and development programs you're doing for your program, whether it be one location, whether it be 25 locations, you start with actually having a very strong business model that is profitable, that allows you to invest in your staff, that allows you to invest back into your center and what you can bring forward. Getting that brand awareness out there takes money, takes time.
I love that you brought this up because I don't think any of our other speakers have mentioned this part of yes, we're all here. We want to take care of the kids. We want to take care of the teachers. And a lot of people that are owners and directors are in that position because they truly love children. And they know that, children are the future. And they're going to be the future leaders. But I love this piece that you brought in is yes, if we want to truly create that effect, because it's an effect, then we have to have this strong, healthy brand business model, and whatever we have, like what we were just talking about until now. So thanks for
let me tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me tell you just a really quick story. We had a center up here in Western New York that had 500 plus enrollments because it was a special needs center. It was a nonprofit special needs center, and it went out of business. And it went out of business as one of the largest ones in the area. It displaced 500 children with special needs. The learning centers, the child care, all the other places around the area did not have an opportunity to bring those kids in. They weren't suited for that. It was a very sad state of affairs. But why? Because the leadership in there were focused in their mind only on the kids, on the fact that it doesn't matter the amount of money it takes. We're going to get them the best of the best. We're going to get them whatever it takes. Well, the problem is they went into significant debt. They had huge issues that were going on. They had grants that they had applied for. They hadn't followed up on the grants. They ended up going out of business and shutting down this very large center that supported behavioral kids. And it was very sad in our industry. And the reason is they didn't look at how their business was faring overall as a business, as
Wow.
what their reputation was. But if they had put the oxygen mask on first and said, okay, even if you're a nonprofit, doesn't mean that you don't make a profit. It just means that, it's one individual not taking, it's a group. So if you focus on, let's make sure that we're a healthy business, like our bodies are healthy, let's stay healthy, so then we can serve others.
This is such a powerful story. My gosh, I have like goosebumps because first of all, it's so sad, but it's a reality of so many nonprofits that are out there. And I know a lot of the attendees that are watching this interview run nonprofits. So I love that you're ending on this note of, yes, you could be running a nonprofit, a faith-based, school or whatever it is, but you still got to look at the health of your organization, which is, a big part of the brand. So Tony, thank you so much for being here. I had a great time. So I hope that everyone enjoyed as well. And thank you for joining us for the EC Leadership Conference.
Love having you. Thanks so much.